For more than a year for goodness sakes, a vast percentage of restaurants in this province have been closed to in person dining. And for many, opening a patio this Friday will mean the first time serving customers something other than carryout since late last fall. With us on what all this means for the industry, we welcome in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Corey Mintz, food reporter whose work has appeared on our website, tvo.org, in the New York Times, and The Walrus, among others. In the Junction neighborhood of the provincial capital, John Sinopoli, executive chef and owner of the Ascari Hospitality Group and co founder of a coalition of independent restaurants called Save Hospitality. And in North York, Nikki Charles, co owners with her sisters of Sugarcane Restaurant. Great to welcome all of you to TVO tonight, and thanks for joining us for this very important and timely conversation. John, to you first. Phase one of Ontario's big reopening plan begins on Friday. That means patios with tables of four can reopen, even if the four are from different households. Bigger tables allowed, if from a single household. That's a change. How big a deal do you think this will make to the restaurant business?
Well, it's huge. It's a start. I mean, it's revenue, like you said, other than takeout or some form of online business. So we welcome it with smiling faces and open arms, and we can't wait for the next phase as well.
Nikki, how about for your business? What's it going to mean?
Yeah, it means the world right now. We're so excited, and we're just ready to go. We're just ready to go. We're trying to get our employees back in and get started.
Corey?
Well, I'm in Manitoba where we're not allowed to even be in each other's backyards, or I think I'm not even allowed to shake my wife's hand. So we're not opening patio service here, but certainly every day I talk to people in Ontario and everyone's thrilled, although certainly a lot of workers that I've spoken to over the last 6 months have very mixed feelings about this.
Well, let's follow up on that with you, Corey, because yes, the patios are now considered safe for patrons, but how safe does it feel for the workers that you've talked to, the kitchen staff, the front of house staff, those kinds of folks?
I can't claim to represent everyone, but everyone that I have spoken to, those that are continuing in the restaurant field, we all know that a lot of people have dropped out and are continuing to drop out, but there's an excitement to return to work. People miss doing what they do because they love doing it, but at the same time, many are feeling scarred from the experience they had last summer when there was patio service for a limited time, and they had to deal with a lot of customers, maybe a minority of customers, but a very vocal and difficult group of customers who were anti-maskers, didn't want to put it on inside, were hostile, and left people just feeling unsafe. And I think that makes people nervous about going back to a new dynamic.
John, can I ask you about how you intend to handle the employee angle?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in discussions with our team one-on-one and as a group for the whole pandemic, trying to keep lines of communications open. And our number one goal with reopening is keeping people safe and keeping our employees safe first and foremost. So we've put in place every protocol and best practice we know of, we can think about to make sure that they feel like they're in an environment where their health and safety is the number one priority.
And Nikki, what's the situation at your place?
Yeah, that's exactly the same. Everybody's excited to come back, and I think there's a little bit more understanding of, about the COVID in general, and so people are not as afraid as when we were open last year, very briefly. So coming back into it, we kind of know what to expect. We're going to do a little bit of retraining with the staff so that we're making sure that we're sanitizing and doing everything that we can to keep everybody safe.
And this may be an obvious question, Nikki, but I presume the rules are going to be staff masks on inside or outside all the time?
Exactly. The staff, everybody's wearing masks. We're doing sanitizing after everybody, like any customers leave the table. We're making sure, like, everything from the tables to the cutlery to the chairs that they're sitting on. We're not taking any chances at all.
John, this may not be a fair question, but we're in a very political environment these days, and these kinds of issues that I'm about to raise, they do come up. We heard Doug Ford, the premier, say the other day that he had done some internal polling for the government. He'd asked people for opinions on reopening the schools, for example. Even if it hurts the economy, should we reopen the schools? And apparently, the answer he got back was the majority said they didn't want to jeopardize the reopening plan, so the schools stay closed. It's probably inevitable, therefore, that there's going to be some criticism that restaurants are allowed to be open and patios are allowed to be open, but the schools have to stay closed. What do you do? How do you deal with that kind of criticism?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I mean, my response to any customer bringing it up would be, it's not our choice. We're dealt the hand we're given by this government, and we have, to be frank, not been dealt a good hand all year long. This government has mismanaged the pandemic to such an extent that we've remained closed longer than any other jurisdiction. We are coming on, June 4th was a horrible anniversary of 365 days of closure over the course of the pandemic. By the time indoor dining is allowed to reopen in July at some point, will it be well over 400 days of indoor dining closures. So we're happy to be open. Our teams need to work. They need to pay their bills and need to feed their families. And the owners of all these restaurants are under incredible financial and emotional stress, given all the extra debt and uncertainty. And, we've invested our lives in our businesses. So it is tough. And for me, I'm not going to comment on school opening and closures. I'm not an expert in that realm. All I know is that restaurants, outdoor dining is now safe. Case numbers are down. Vaccinations are up. We look forward to continuing this trend, keep operating in a safe manner so that the public can trust that what we're doing is of no risk to the general health and welfare of Ontarians.
Corey, I should get you to weigh in on this aspect of it. There's so many different ways of looking at how this pandemic has affected our society. Obviously, what it's done to our hospitals, what it's done to our schools. Heck, if you want to be flip, what it's done to our golf courses. How about restaurants? Do you think the province of Ontario has made the right calls as it relates to handling restaurants over the past year and change?
No. I mean, you can look at the federal, provincial, and municipal responses very differently, but it seems like over the last year, what is to restaurateurs a snail's pace was nonetheless a lightning pace for the government to be rolling out the various, wage subsidies, rent subsidies, for all the criticism of those programs. At a provincial level, there's been such a lack of communication, and I think we only need to point to the example of, when was it in March, where restaurants were told they could open to some degree, and then within weeks were told to close again, and they all incurred ridiculous expenses at restaffing and restocking. I think there's just a failure repeatedly to understand what the business is actually like.
Nikki, can I get you on that too?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can't just open and close a restaurant. It takes time. We're, like you said, we're stocking things. We're getting our employees ready, our food, just purchasing things. And that really hit hard in March when we were told to be open. And everybody was really cautious. I think a lot of other restaurateurs that I was speaking with were very cautious about opening. And we just kind of went ahead and did it. And then to be told that we have to close right after that, right after opening, it's just so hard. It's hard financially. It's hard, like, just mentally. It's just, it wasn't a good idea. Not a good idea, and not a good time at all.
Well, let me follow up on that financial angle since you brought it up. You are going to be allowed to have patios open now, not the indoors, but the patios. Can you break even with patio only service?
For us, I think we'll be fine with the patio service. Thank goodness for the cafeTO program that we have going on. So we have a curbside dining, which will give us at least 25 seats. So 25 seats, as opposed to just having takeout and delivery, is wonderful. So we'll at least be able to pay the bills, and maybe not pay ourselves, but pay the bills. And we should be good.
And I guess we should remind everybody, like, you barely got open before COVID hit, right? When did you open up again?
Our June 15th will be our second year anniversary. So we've been open since 2019, and we came out swinging. It was an awesome time. Things were looking so good, and COVID hit, and Honestly, we're so shocked as well as just so grateful to still be here, because to be in a second year of opening a restaurant, some people don't make it on regular terms. So for us to pull through, with COVID, it means the world to us.
John, how about you? Can you be profitable with patio only service?
Um, if the subsidies remain, yes. But break even, I would say. It's not really profitable. We're staying open I mean, the first rule of business is stay in business. And so opening the patios helps us stay in business. Uh, but I'd like to remind everybody that it is a minority of restaurants that have the ability to open a patio. cafeTO only exists in certain neighborhoods in Toronto. There are thousands of restaurants that are either in the financial core, in large office buildings, uh, in strip malls around the suburbs that have no cafeTO program and no ability to open a patio. And they're like shit out of luck, for lack of a better phrase,
Yep.
excuse my language. And I think the public needs to know, just because patios are opening and the governments are making a lot of fanfare about that and everyone's excited, is that, it's a minority of restaurants. And some people, like with 20 seats, don't break even because indoors they have 200 seats. And their rent, by the way, is not being discounted at the moment. So I think that everyone has to be very aware that the opening of patios and the ability to take out does not solve the problem. The problem, it persists as long as our indoor dining is restricted or fully closed as it is now. And that governments need to stop the rhetoric of it's time to ramp down subsidies and supports because things are getting back to normal. It's the furthest from the truth in our industry. Retail is fared very well because people don't mind doing curbside pickup, buying online, shopping around. But for us, bums and seats is where the dollars are at, full stop. And those seats, for the lion's share, are indoors.
I gather SOL is a technical term in the culinary business.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
For sure.
I thought I'd heard it
For
before.
sure.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Corey,
I
no,
can,
don't apologize. I totally get it. Don't apologize. Corey, we've heard about this cafeTO program several times already, and I don't want to assume everybody knows what that is. Can you just briefly explain what cafeTO is designed to do?
well, a year ago, as several people have described to me, it was Wild West for the restaurants in terms of, I talked to owners. I mean, basically, cafeTO was the pandemic-related street side dining program, and it sort of streamlined what was a very bureaucratic procedure for getting your patio license into basically saying, like, just get it done because we know you need to make money. The only way to do that right now is by dining outside. A year ago, effectively, most restaurateurs tell me they were told, just do it, just put it up. Don't worry, nobody's going to fine you. And this year, I'm finding most restaurateurs are encountering a lot more red tape and people, government agencies that want blueprints. Just to jump on what both John and Nikki are saying, maybe they can discuss their numbers or not. But on the average, so that people have an understanding, on the average, most restaurateurs I talk to have those that are surviving are operating over the last year at a 75% reduction in revenue. So when we talk about breaking even, they're down this much, and they're only in existence due to, for the most part, government subsidies. So the tapering off, the timing of that tapering off, and the communication from the federal government about that tapering off has to be part of the conversation, not just can you make do with serving people on the patio.
Understood. All right. Well, Nikki, let's do some numbers on this then. Under normal circumstances, what would be your patio space size? And then with
Well,
cafeTO, how much bigger does it get?
well, our normal space size for our patio and would be about 4 people, as opposed to us having 25 people.
Oh, so that's
So
huge.
it's huge. That is huge for us. So that's why we're excited. But like you were saying before, not everybody has that opportunity to be able to do to do that. But for us, it really works, which is why we're so anxious to be able to open up that. And and we weren't 100% sure even when we were getting into it last year whether if this is going to be something that's temporary or something that's going to be going on. I don't even still don't know if it's temporary or not, but We spent thousands of dollars on patio furniture to be able to do that. So to have to put that kind of money into it, um, not knowing if this is gonna, pay off, that was the risk that we had to take, but to have 25 seats out there, it was a risk we did take. So, yeah.
Interesting. John, can I get your numbers as well? What are you normally for patio size? And then what does cafeTO
Yeah.
allow you to do? And any idea if it's permanent?
Well, Well, we have four venues. We have three restaurants and a bar. One of our smallest restaurant is 38 seats inside. Normally zero patio with cafeTO on a city boulevard, which, like Corey said, they're now asking us for blueprints and all kinds of red tape that we didn't have to go through last year, and it's all up in the air. But we've got about 20 seats there, so we're just above 50% of our normal capacity. And when you think about how restaurant business models operate, running at 50% capacity is not making money, right? It doesn't make any
Yes.
sense because you're normally paying your rent on full capacity, right? So our other two locations, restaurants, have larger patios, but both patios are smaller than the actual indoor dining capacity. Those are larger restaurants of 70 and 110 seats each inside. And then we have a bar, a neighborhood bar, Queen and Broadview, that is has no patio normally. So we're very lucky to have 30 or 40 seats on the street this summer. And like for us, cafeTO has been extremely beneficial, but we also have the privilege of being able to have places with rent in high rent Main Street sections of the city, unlike a lot of restaurateurs. And I think that the provincial government needs to step up and understand that the federal government's been towing the line with subsidies for the most part of the pandemic. They need to continue to do so, but the provincial government needs to understand that there's a lot of structural issues in our business model that created challenges before the pandemic and have really, really unraveled our business model with reduced volumes due to restrictions. And the number one thing for us is the wholesale pricing of alcohol and the inability for us to pay below retail prices on alcohol. So our number one ask of the provincial government, Steve, is that they very quickly institute a 1 year temporary reduction in reduction in LCBO licensee markup by 20%, while we can revisit the entire structure of the LCBO purchasing system for restaurant licensees. We're the only jurisdiction in the Western world that restaurant licensees or anyone who purchases alcohol for resale, whether you're an event venue or a concert venue, whatever, pays more than the consuming public for that alcohol. Considering the volumes we've spent in 2019, $577 million in alcohol, and we got a 0% discount. So that doesn't make sense to me in the modern world in economics. We need to change. That's the number one thing the provincial government can do to improve our business model, create a structural change for success for our industry moving forward.
You've put that ask in. Any indication when they're going to get back to you on that?
We're in discussions. We've got a couple of meetings upcoming. We got a lot of indications it was going to be in the previous budget in February. It wasn't there. We were extremely disappointed. It may have been because of the change in finance ministers and new staff in office coming in. That disruption was not good for our advocacy. However, we're optimistic that they understand that this is a serious problem. BC did it. We're talking about an NDP socialist government that did something for small business that our provincial government, who's supposedly pro-small business, pro-business in general, and anti-tax, can't seem to muster the courage to do, and we don't get it. BC put in a permanent 20% reduction on alcohol purchases for their hospitality industry. We need the same here. It already exists in Alberta. It would exist to some extent in Quebec. It newly exists in PEI in New Brunswick. These are places that are competitive jurisdictions for us. We don't have any advantage whatsoever now. Alcohol purchases, for the most part, for sit-down restaurants represent anywhere from 40% of your entire product purchases. And if we could get that discount, it just puts money right to our bottom line. And we're going to show the government, we're going to produce that revenue back in volume over the years without issue. And just the jobs it saves, the taxes that are going to go back into the provincial coffers with this one move, way more, or way more than the discount they would actually give us, because we're going to produce more sales tax, more HST, more payroll tax, more income tax for the people who are being employed. And the new kind of out the door retail model with takeout for alcohol also gives a new opportunity for small communities who are not serviced by LCBOs around the province, because the LCBO system is very limited for people unless you're in a major urban center. It gives them access to purchasing alcohol at a reasonable price from their local bar and pub, and just feeds their local economy in their own town.
Let me circle back to Corey and just see if we can put to bed this issue of cafeTO, and whether, Corey, you've heard as to whether it will become a permanent feature of the capital city of Ontario. Do you like the idea? Is it working?
Yeah, I think expanding and making the cafe legislation a bit looser and flexible sounds good. It doesn't come without complications. Restaurants have neighbors, and it's fine to say during a pandemic, let's ignore the rules. But on a permanent basis, it probably incurs more problems than we're considering right now versus what John and his hospitality group is proposing. A lowering of wholesale pricing on alcohol. That's a benefit for everybody across the board. I think that makes more sense in terms of something we can do for the industry versus the patio situation.
Gotcha. I guess it was John who said earlier in the program that the main goal of business is to stay in business. And Nikki, I want to start with you on this one. Last year, I mean, you've talked about it already, how brutal it was. You'd barely got the doors open on your restaurant when you had to shut down because of COVID-19.
Right.
Was there a moment over the past 15 months or so where you thought, we're not going to make it?
There were many moments of that. My sisters and I are from the time we heard about COVID. We scrambled to basically go and get delivery services and whatnot, which we didn't have before, and that wasn't working. It just wasn't working. We didn't really get to advertise that we were on these devices and these new delivery services. So we literally ended up closing for 2 months. And during the 2 months, it was like we were glued to the television, just wondering and waiting for the government or for Ford or somebody to say, this is what we're doing, or however. We had no idea. So literally, we had some very, very scary conversations on the phone, lots of tears, lots of fear, we just opened. So it was very, very scary, but we did reopen. And once we were able to get the word out there that we were on these new delivery services and we're open for takeout, people literally came running in, and our customers have been super supportive.
And how many sisters are you that own the business?
It's 3 of us. I have 7 sisters, but it's 3 of us that are running Sugarcane right now.
Okay, but, even if there's only 3 of you, we do know how sisters can be. And yes. Has it been sort of unanimous all the way through that you were going to stay in business, or might there have been 1 or 2 sisters who thought, really? You know what, we put enough money into this already, and that's enough?
Right. Honestly, we have been. It's very hard to believe. A lot of people are like, how do you even work? We've been working together for over 10 years now, and we have been unanimous on pretty much everything going, especially when it comes to sugarcane. But we were definitely unanimous in wanting to fight, stay and fight for sugarcane. So yeah, it's our blood, sweat, and tears, man. It's like, can't give up.
Good for you. We should give you the chance to say the address of the place, so if people want to come,
sure. 699 Danforth Ave. We're in the heart of Greektown, and the Greek community and everybody on the Danforth has embraced us so lovingly, and we wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Danforth
Fantastic.
And Pape.
Danforth and Pape. Know it well. Yeah. Okay. John, how about to you? Did you come close to having to shut down any of your restaurants this past year?
No, we're fortunate. We've been around for 15 years as a a company, and we were in a growth pattern. Like Nikki, we opened our largest ever restaurant at significant cost at King Street West 9 months before the pandemic hit. We were about to turn the corner of profitability and gaining momentum going into the summer, and the rug got pulled out from underneath our feet, like thousands of other restaurateurs. I mean, I hear Nikki's story, and I'm like, if there is a reason that the government should understand that the restaurant industry is worth investing in, it's Nikki's story, and there's thousands of stories like that. We're talking about people who put their heart and soul, and they won't give up. They're there for their employees and for their business. I mean, there's a lot of bean counters out there who open businesses who would have shut half of our places down in a heartbeat. In fact, thousands of restaurateurs are operating in virtual bankruptcy at the moment, yet they won't give up. So it shocks me that our federal and provincial governments don't understand that a sector specific support program is necessary, given all the vulnerabilities of our industry and given the heart and soul that this industry has shown throughout this pandemic to power through and to do the right thing for their employees, for their customers. And I mean, it just shows we create community, full stop. More than hardly any other business, we create community. And places like Nikki's and ours in the East End, in the West End, just show that. And we really wish the government would take notice and not treat us like every other small business in a huge umbrella across the nation.
Exactly.
Do you have any, John, any reliable data which would indicate how many restaurants, in fact, did not make it to the finish line and have gone out of business?
So unfortunately, no. That is tough because when you're in lockdown, you kind of don't know whether people are open or closed. Like they may have decided to close, and there's no announcement because there's no paper on the windows yet, or there's no vacancy signs because it wouldn't make sense for the landlord to try to rent the space in the middle of a shutdown. The last we heard was 10%, but that was more than a year ago. And we know that those numbers are increased. You know, my anecdotal guess would be that we're approaching 20% of shutdown of pre-pandemic. And again, we've got many, many thousands of businesses currently operating in virtual bankruptcy. Like they're leveraged to the hilt. They don't have any cash flow. They're just saying, we're going to try and open and see what happens. But I think as the subsidies get diminished and slowly go away, that the reality will set in, and a lot of places are going to be, you know, in very, very hard times.
Corey,
on the brink.
Right, on the brink. Corey, I want, you've got a sort of sector-wide knowledge of how this is going to work going forward. So let me put this number to you here. The May labor force survey from Stats Canada apparently shows that food services are still, of course, among the hardest hit industries for job losses. Apparently, 2/3 of jobs still missing from pre-COVID times are in food services and accommodation. So this is a sector of our economy that has really disproportionately taken a hit and still does. Now, admittedly, Friday with stage 1 reopening, they're going to be able to reclaim some of that economic development. But in your view, as you look across the whole sector, what's going to have to happen in order for things to get back to much more pre-pandemic normal?
Well, there's no such thing as pre-pandemic normal without Dr. Doom's time machine, because we can't go back to 2019. But when you talk about hospitality, let's include tourism in the sort of economic sectors that the federal government doesn't really understand. I spoke with a few economists who said when they were in school, they never heard the word restaurant or hospitality. It just was a huge blind spot because in their education and then the governments that they advise, they really focus on energy extraction and trade and manufacturing. So I think there's a big blind spot at the federal level. I know John has been talking about the idea of a Department of Hospitality and some level of representation from the government in understanding a sector that employs 1.2 million Canadians, or did in 2019, and generates 5% of Canada's GDP. That seems worth an office and maybe a couple staff members and a printer in Ottawa. I don't think we can go back to the way things were before, but on the government's end, there can be a devotion to what is a big part of our economy. And on the consumer's end, there can be a changing attitude to the relationship that we have with restaurants, which I don't want to hijack this conversation, take up too much of your time, but there's an opportunity for us to reevaluate how we interact with restaurants. And it starts this Friday with people being cool. When you go and eat on a patio, be cool when you're interacting with
Mm-hmm.
staff.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you did give us a hint there about what your next book is going to be about. So as long as we're on the topic, you do have a book coming out this fall called The Next Supper, The End of Restaurants as We Knew Them and What Comes After. We'll have to have you back in the fall to talk more specifically about the book, but you certainly in your last answer hinted at a very different future for this business. But I presume, and Corey, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I presume the best thing that all the rest of us can do in order to help the restaurant sector is get vaccinated, as many of us as possible, so that we can get back to going out in the evenings. Is that fair?
But that's the best thing all of us can do for everyone in every sector, and for education and transportation and retail and restaurants. Yes, we should all go out and get vaccinated. But certainly, if we're going to go back to a restaurant, yes, we should be vaccinated.
Nikki, we're down to our last minute and change here, and we've talked about the help on LCBO that you would like. We know the wage support is very helpful, the rent support, presumably you would love to see more of that. If there is, I guess, what they call sector-specific economic relief packages still to come, what else would you like to see in it?
Oh boy, more of the rent. Yeah, like covering the rent, the subsidy for the rent, just a little bit more. Like I think at the beginning last year, they were covering. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was like 60 to 70% or something along those lines. Especially the with the wage subsidy. So maybe going back to something a little closer to that would very very much help, and to also follow through on the grants that they offered some of these businesses. We're still waiting. It's been since January. We haven't seen a penny.
John, you want to take the last 30 seconds? A sector-specific economic package includes what?
Yeah, well, it includes going, as Nikki said, going back to the original calculator for wage and rent subsidies that existed last fall, because the government quietly changed those calculators so that if you were down 75%, you got 65%. Now, if you're down 75%, you only get like 55%, 40%, which is insane given what was happening over the winter. But just for some hard numbers, Steve, to finish in terms of sector specific, Ontario alone is down still 111,500 hospitality jobs now. If that was the case in the manufacturing or the automotive or the airline sector, this government would be jumping through hoops to figure out how to get these jobs back. But because it's the hospitality and restaurant sector, which is, as Corey said, basically been ignored by government departments for 30, 40 years as the industry quadrupled in size, nothing's being done. Sector specific, nothing is being done. So hard numbers, like we're 360,000 jobs across the country down. I mean, that's the size of London, Ontario, down. No one's got jobs back. So, and as we reopen, who knows how many of those are coming back, given the restrictions and the shrinking of the sector. Governments need to stand up and understand they need at least a department, but perhaps a ministry of hospitality, tourism, and restaurants to manage this massive part of our economy that represents, 4 to 5% of the GDP and 8 to 9% of the entire country's workforce.
Interesting. I guess the problem with you guys, John, is that you're not a big three like the automakers. You're a big 300 or 400,000. That's a problem
exactly.
when you're looking for political power.
We don't have 10 CEOs. We have 90,000 CEOs. That's the problem. And we're a very diverse, disparate group that's hard to create one voice to talk about. But that shouldn't be a reason for the government to ignore us. It makes it easier for them to ignore us politically. But we need to get together and figure out how to create that political leverage and to create a voice and a movement in a unified ask so that they understand the impact that it will have. And like I said before, what other better people to invest in? Most restaurant owners are, new immigrants, new to the country, racialized, sexualized. Like they're all the people that need the help the most. And this is who the government should be investing in.
John Sinopoli, Corey Mintz, Nikki Charles, really good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight.
Thank you.
Good luck to one and all.
Thank
you,
you.
Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.